what we want now is to have an open discussion. So probably when we were organizing with Innovamat this meeting and this talk with you, we were thinking a lot on the results in Catalonia, right? We were very worried about the last assessment in Catalonia, and probably this is going to be in the air for all the assistants today, that you have here many people working in schools and institutes, in high schools and lower schools and primary schools. And you have here, first of all, Verónica, that is in the boarding, directing boarding in a school, in Escola L'Horitzó, and working also with Innovamat, and Albert, that is doing more research and, at the university. Probably Verónica more focused on the language results, and sure, Albert more in the math results. So everybody's looking at the detail of what's going on and a little bit worried. So I think I will first give the floor to both of them that have questions, but I just wanted to raise that it's very nice that you started with this complement, not only focusing on language and math and science and all the tests and assessing that, but also introducing these social emotions, right? Other dimensions, right? Mm-hmm. As the chairman of the foundation was saying, our professor, Anton Costas, always says, okay, what we do not measure is the thing that we should worry about, right? Because if we measure, at least we know what's going on. And you are opening that in PISA, that dimensions. And probably you have a lot of questions also about the details of what we are assessing truly with the PISA assessment, that it has been changing across time. And that is something that we want to discuss with you. So first of all, maybe Verónica and then Albert.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you, Innovamat and Cercle d'Economia, for giving us teachers and board members of schools voice, because I'm sure that's not I feel more comfortable in a class than here. But listening to you, Andres, and thank you for that, also makes me very optimistic and makes me renew my vows as a teacher, because I feel like there's a way of doing things, and that makes me renew my vows, which is a very important thing for teachers, and at the end of a school year, even more. The way we see it is that if we want to change the education in order to make it more aligned to the new challenges our students will face, we have to change a lot of things. One of them maybe is to change the focus from the answer to the question. No? Education is not about finding the right answer anymore, but maybe more to guiding students and even teachers to being able to ask the good questions. No? And that's what we can also find in PISA tests, that it's not only about knowing the result or the answer of a math question, but to being able to think as a mathematician, which is in part being able of making good questions. But we've been worried, as Joan-Ramon said also, and we've been planning all day, I'm sure, about the results in Catalonia. And we are worried as schools because some of the media and some people who were trying to interpret those results were saying that what we should do is go back to the past and go harder in contents. And that's very confusing for us and very difficult for us, because even if we are a school like us, that we try to, that we understand that contents and competency are the two sides of the same coin. And even if we try to do, as you said, go deeper and not adding things to our curriculum, sometimes we find it difficult to explain this to our families, and because we feel like we are fighting against Goliath, no? We are like a small David fighting against Goliath. So the question is, sorry for the... The question is, please, can you help us with that? So can you help us to interpret or to find a narrative to interpret those results in order to communicate better with our families and the society, because to fight these people who are saying, oh, we have to go back to the past.
Yeah, education is a very conservative social enterprise. And as you say, we as parents are sometimes a part of the problem, not part of the solution. And we get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was important to us, or when they learn things we no longer understand. I would say even as a teacher, often you teach more like you were taught than how you were taught to teach.
Yeah,
Same thing. And I think as a policymaker, you can lose an election over education when something small goes wrong, but you're not going to win an election over education because it just takes a lot of time to put good ideas into. So the context is really difficult, but how can you make a difference? I actually believe that the business community is very powerful on this. They, if we had a clear articulation in our societies of what we do need for tomorrow's world, how do we educate learners for their future rather than our past, everything would be a lot easier. I think every person in the business community will tell you that, the reproduction of subject matter content no longer matters. We need people who can think for themselves, who can work with others, who can live with the planet. Those are the dimensions that, but these voices often do not get articulated. The education debate is often dominated by the kind of internal forces of education without the kind of world speaking to this. And I think that's very important. These are the people who can really help. The second part is, ask yourself where, well-educated parents send their children. They typically send their children to schools that are actually really good in helping you to think creatively, to solve complex problems, to develop social emotional skills. And that's usually a distinguishing feature of those schools. So I think, what wise parents choose for their children is what, public policy should aim to provide for all children. So I think actually many forces point in that direction. I think, I really believe communication is a big part of that puzzle. And if you need a last argument, I'll give you. The PISA test, I can't tell you, the day then what will happen, but it will happen that PISA will give people access to the internet. Even in 2025, next year, we are going to open up a PISA component where students have access to digital tutors. We want to assess, can you think like a mathematician? Do you have deep conceptual understanding? Can you solve complex mathematical problems? I'm not interested whether you know a specific formula and equation. If you can actually look it up, great. Don't waste your time. And so in a way, I think the PISA test will mirror more and more how the world is evolving. And so I think, that for me is part of the decline that we have seen in Europe and in Spain and Catalonia, is that we have too much put weight on teaching children for our past rather than their future. So our metrics, and I personally believe, the same is true for Spanish exams. I do hope that Spanish exams will become better at valuing what matters for the future than just what was important in the past. Those metrics convince parents, once they see actually, you cannot improve what you cannot see, and making this, what matters for success really better visible, I think is a big part of that answer. I can tell you, because the countries that have moved successfully on that trajectory have really had a very, very good kind of public discourse on that, with the help of society. Society knows what will need it for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ahmed?
Okay, I'm also very thankful for being here with all of you. And I wanted to dive a little more into your view. Like, you have a better understanding of the different countries than probably we tend to focus in ourselves and try to make things better for ourselves. And I wanted to ask you about this overview that you probably have from different countries. You were talking about Estonia, Portugal, Singapore in your speech. How much would you say that success comes also from a change in society, right? And linking with what Veronica was asking, right? How much of the success is explained not just by what happens in school, but what happens in society, and how can we help transform that from universities, from schools? Because I think I perceive that societies that see education, for instance, Singapore, probably in a more valued way, the intellectual incentives that you were talking about, probably have more success, right? What's your overview on this matter?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. The most obvious point you can make is that societies, economies that can draw a lot of value from natural resources do very bad on pizza. Oil and pizza do not mix. That's what you can see very, very clearly across the world. And that's very natural to explain. You know, if you do not feel the need to advance yourself, it's going to be harder. But, you know, I would also say that often education systems reinforce notions. I mentioned that point about growth mindset. If the education system, if society, teachers, the education system gives you that message, you are just not, you know, when we make things easier for you rather than more demanding, then we actually create, that becomes a reinforcing circle. So, I mean, you always have to think about what's cause and effect. But generally, what I would say is that, you know, schools should become much more open to the world. Schools are often good at keeping students inside and the rest of the world outside. And the more we can actually build effective bridges, the more we can help people understand what the future will need from them, the more we will motivate young people. And the most important decisions about your career, you do not make when you graduate, you make when you enter school. It's primary schools where aspirations get shaped, where, you know, dreams get formed. And the more we actually give children in that age a real understanding of what the world means for them, the better we do. And in my presentation this morning, I just cited, you know, the work of Education Employers. It's a small charity in England. You know, they said we had that problem that, you know, particularly children from disadvantaged families never had met an engineer, so why would I be interested in science, particularly if I'm a girl and see only, you know, male figures in those kind of roles. And
the role models.
Yeah. So they basically said, okay, you know, we posted an advertisement, who is willing to donate 2 hours per month to help children in primary school explain their own job. It's not a very difficult thing to do, it doesn't take a lot of time. And in the first round, they got over 40,000 volunteers, which shows there's a great willingness in society to make a difference, to make a contribution. And I can tell you, it's these people who've changed aspirations more than anything you do in a classroom, in a way, and giving young people the dream. Oh, this, I want to be like this. And then, you know, you create that motivation. That motivation becomes the engine. So I think building. So in a way, I think you could take a pessimistic view, well, if your society is not demanding great skills, there's nothing you can do. Or you can take an optimistic view and say, well, how can we leverage actually that potential, bring it into education and then change education? I do believe the demand, you know, people often say, well, you know, we don't want to controversy about education. Actually, the more controversy, the more public debate you have on education, the more people, you know, express their views on this, the more you will see change.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to jump up?
Oh, I have like 100, so...
You may have a last one, and then
Okay,
we can
perfect.
open the floor for everybody, okay?
Sorry, Albert, I have the last one, okay?
I'll sit there and ask.
Yeah. Albert was asking about how we do in different countries, no? How if we can compare or not. And you were talking before about the teachers, which for us as a school board members and teachers is one of our main concerns. We understand that every country treats their teachers differently, but I was very happy when I heard you saying in another interview that education has a social nature, and that school is a relational and social enterprise, which make us think what we already understood, that AI and technology is not going to substitute the teacher. But of course, the role of the teacher has to change a lot, not only because of technology, but also because the challenges we are facing are very, very different. And we surely need another kind of guidance for our students. And I heard you saying also in a very interesting interview that in a late survey you discovered that the most important predictor for curiosity in students is the nature of teacher-student relationship, which amazed me because it puts us in the spot a little bit. So we have to be very, very good at taking care of this very important relationship. But I'm sure that we agree that to preserve any kind of relationship, we have to be good. We have to be in good shape. No, our soul has to be like very, very good taken care of. And this is not exactly what is happening here in our country. In Catalonia, we have lots of teachers that are not feeling well. They feel overwhelmed. They feel lost. they fall in mental health issues, they don't feel they have the recognition they deserve. It's not about money, as you said, but they don't feel they are getting the salary they deserve, and they don't have this sense of agency that you were talking about before. And we have lots of teachers that are quitting now. On the other hand, you were talking about other countries that treat their teachers very differently, and they have more social recognition. To become a teacher, they have to pass like some tests. No, they are chosen. No, I don't know how to say it, but they are like kind of chosen. And me as a member of a school, I find it very difficult sometimes to make my teachers feel better. So could you help us with that too? Like as a school, as a board school member, how can I help my teachers feeling better? Of course, there's a political issue, so if you could also talk to our politicians, would be very happy, and help them to treat better their teachers. But of course, there's a social thing as well that we can't change like super fast. But from the school, what can I do with my teachers to make them feel better?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the most challenging aspects, and I totally agree with your premise. You know, if teachers do not feel that sense of agency and well-being, it's very hard to see them relating well to their students. At the same time, you know, I think the idea that you can, you know, make teachers feel well and then things will change in the classroom. I'm not sure. I think, you know, when teachers complain about workload and stress and anxiety and all of that, the source is often not, you know, the amount of work, but work organization. I can give you an example for this. When you look at, and I don't have data for Catalonia, just for Spain as a whole. When you ask yourself, you know, we have measured perceived teacher stress, and we have measured, you know, the contact hours with students, and we see very little of a relationship. Teachers spending time with students doesn't drive anxiety, stress, all of that. When teachers do work that they do not relate to the work of students, you know, general administrative work, all of that, the relationship becomes extremely steep. So I think, you know, one way you can do is, you know, change work organization so that teachers just have more time to work with individual students. And I'll give you something that, you know, probably you will not agree with, but sometimes, you know, teaching a larger class and therefore being free to spend more time on other things than teaching, to work with your colleagues, to spend time with individual students, to take care of students. The more you relate to your students, and this is where this data comes from, the more time you have to relate to your students, the better you will find the disciplinary climate in the classroom. You know, discipline doesn't come from, you know, rules and regulations. Discipline comes from motivation, from relationships, from trust. The more you can create this, and the more your disciplinary climate is positive, the more you feel well as a teacher. So you have to sometimes look at the other end of that. Now, so creating a work organization where teachers have really time to spend with the students, know who their students are, time for professional collaborative development. Here, you know, you can teach and then you go home and do your lesson plans and everything in isolation. That's actually a very hostile environment to the well-being of teachers, because you end up with your problems on your own. If you look at education systems where teachers spend more of the day in the school with their colleagues, you know, supporting each other, you know, working with each other, designing new practices with each other, it may sound counterintuitive, but in those education systems, teachers have a higher degree of well-being. They feel better supported. They feel more embedded in the professional networks. The collaborative component is a strong predictor for teacher job satisfaction. So again, I think you can do a lot in a school by changing the way in which we work to actually raise this. The last point I want to make is also really important. You know, while salaries don't explain teacher well-being, it's an attractiveness of the profession. The more opportunities teachers have to build social capital and to store it in a way, to keep it, the more attractive the profession. So the more, if your parents only call you when there is a problem, or you call them when their students did a mess, you have a hostile relationship, and it will be painful for both sides. If there is a natural way for you to interact with them, and they participate, and they know what their students are doing, and they trust, you know, the way their students learn, you have a productive working relationship. And often, we keep teachers behind closed walls in the school, and then society is mistrustful. Everybody mistrusts people they do not know. The more society knows the people, they have a role in society, in the communities, they speak to parents. Why are, it's really funny, in Spain, early childhood teachers, teachers in kindergarten, are the least paid and the most respected. Teachers in the lycées are the least respected, the best paid. Ask yourself where this comes from. And the answer is, in the early years, the teachers are the partners of the parents. They work on this together. They know their children. And that is something we lose. Education becomes more and more transactional. And we lose that social fabric. So those three elements, I think, are a big part of that answer.
And do you think here enters also assessment? Like maybe in kindergarten, in early years, the assessment is not like something you have upon you, like there's a roof that you can't. No, but when you go to high school, like everybody's so intensively and stressed out by assessment that, do you think it has a little bit?
Yeah, I personally believe that assessment is incredibly important, because you need to have better tools to see where we are. But you're right, if they become an objective in themselves, they become an obstacle to productive learning. I actually, think that, again, this mistake that we have made in education was to divorce learning and assessment. We get students to pile up years and years of learning, and then we push them back on an exam. Tell me everything that you know in 1 hour. That is very unproductive. It has made learning superficial. It makes teaching superficial. I think with technology today, we can completely integrate learning and assessment and give teachers better tools to see how different students learn differently, give students better feedback. I think we can overcome that. So without, diminishing, actually improving assessment, we can strengthen the connection with productive learning.
Okay. So in Circular Economy, always we open the floor. So let's open the floor for 5 or 7 minutes remaining time, and then, Albert, you will have your last opportunity also. I don't want to be unfair. Okay, so Beatriz here. Empieza por educar, right?
I think, I'm not sure if this is working.
Hola?
Yes. Yeah, okay, thanks so much for your insight. In Empieza por Educar, we believe that the most competent and committed teachers should go to teach to the most complex schools. However, in Catalonia and the rest of Spain, and that's not the case. Schools have few powers to choose the teachers and establish them the teaching staff. So, as per your words, traveling to Portugal is not going to help. So now that you have this like a helicopter view, can you help us to see if there's any tip or anything that, according to your experience, we can do? Thank you.
Again, I think career incentives can be very powerful. I give you 2 examples. One example is the state of Ceará in Brazil. What they did there is when you're a high-performing school, they would give you more resources, and you're not allowed to spend the resources in your own school. You're only allowed to spend the resources to support a low-performing school. So they pair these high and low-performing schools. It has been actually incredibly effective. It has, if you give a low-performing school more money, you're not going to achieve much. If you give the low-performing school the expertise of schools and the motivation of schools, you can achieve a lot. You can work on individual careers. Some education systems say to a teacher, if you want to advance in your career, you have to go to one of a school that is particularly tough and show that you can turn it around. Aligning resources with needs. Sweden has done that for some years, where they actually used formula-based funding. And I think we can do better, and we can also make it socially more prestigious to have teachers teaching in difficult schools. In other sectors of our economy, that works very well. If you are a surgeon, you wouldn't want to operate every day the appendix. You would want to do the most complicated brain operation whatsoever. So people are rewarded for treating the most challenging patients. And I think we can do better in education too, to actually make it more visible that actually, we look at the improvement that you achieve as a teacher. And again, when you go to Shanghai in China, how did they, reduce between student variability by over 50% in 6 years? Because it's very simple, actually. They said to teachers, if you go to a disadvantaged school, you double your speed with which you advance in your career. So suddenly those most poorer schools became the magnet. Everybody went there. I want to teach there. I want to help those students. And it became famous teachers. And because they had great teachers, suddenly those schools became very good. It's not, I think, very difficult. I think the problem that you have in Spain is a kind of one-size-fits-all mentality. Every teacher gets the same employment, the same, and then it becomes intrinsically unattractive to teach in a difficult school. But I think this is easy to change.
While the micro goes to Eduard there, I have a question, very quick question. Can you control in the PISA assessment about the effort that the people is putting? My sense is that here in Catalonia, schools that are selected to have the test, it's like a burden for them. Wow. And it seems that in Asian countries, when there is a school that has to do the test, they take it as a challenge, right? And everybody jumps up and puts a lot of effort on that.
We do actually, we have a measure on that in PISA. It's where we actually ask students about the experiences, the test in the schools, and it's not so obvious. You see a little effect on this. I would actually say, you know, there are education systems where students put an effort into almost anything you ask them to do,
right.
and probably also anything in life. You know, I think motivation is just very high. But in terms of the PISA test, actually, we try to keep it as a low-stakes test. We don't want to see what you can do under optimal conditions. We want to see what you would do every day.
Okay. Go on.
Thanks.
Should be working.
It does? It doesn't?
Yes.
Yeah. In Catalonia and Spain, public school teachers are selected as civil servants through memoristic exams, and in a way that schools cannot practically select them. So they are part of a big group, and they are allocated that way. In the last years, precisely for different elements of a preparation, it has been decisions related with not asking for the training qualifications that they needed, particularly in secondary education, to enter, or even to take interim teachers as permanent teachers for the next 30, 40 years, which means that practically for the last 40 years, we haven't had a proper system to guarantee the quality of the teachers. But the data that you always show says that to guarantee quality, the quality of teachers is key for the quality of learning. What are your thoughts on how, in the context that we could lead with this big contradiction of having a system that cannot guarantee the quality of teachers and their professional development, and yet knowing that is the key element for guaranteeing the quality of learning?
Yeah, I think you make a very important point. I would highlight two dimensions. One is development of teachers. You know, I would say, you know, rather than selecting teachers just by an academic test, you know, make sure that teachers spend a big part of their initial training in actual schools, you know, to get real experience with real students, learn, you know. Apprenticeship works so well, and the school is a great place where you can actually do that. And many high-performing systems, teachers would spend a lot more time in the school, in the development, and have a much better understanding, is this a job I like, is this where I'm good at? And that's where the selection takes place. You know, in Finland, you know, it's easy to make it into the first year of teacher training in the university, everybody can go in. In the second year, you spend 80% of your time in school, and that's where they pick 1 out of 9. You are evaluated, can you deal with students, can you work with colleagues, and so on. I think that's, so that's the development part where you can do a lot. But I also believe recruitment, you know, I mean, I know people are divided over this, but I do believe that schools should have a say of who works with them. I think that's really, really important. You can actually, I mean, do you need to change the whole teacher recruitment system? Not necessarily, but you could at least ask school principals to be on the recruitment panel. You know, even if the government decides, you know, where the teachers go, you could put school principals in give them some voice of saying, look, this is a teacher among 3 others I really would want to work with. No? So I think there are many, even within the culture that you have here, that you have, you know, this pool of teachers and so on, I think you could do a lot to give schools more discretion it's very, you know, I think it's true for any place in the work. If you just, you know, send people to work with, it's very, very hard to build the kind of community that sometimes it's a matter of personal fit. You know, schools have their own ethos, schools have their own, you know, work culture, and I think you need to give school leaders some role in shaping that. No?
We are running out of time, so Albert, it's your
Very
last
fast,
chance to jump in, and we should be closing, yeah.
Yeah, to close. We've always perceived PISA, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know better, as a good way to kindly invite systems to change, right? Because if you have an assessment that is competency-based, you kind of are forced to change your approach to education. And I wanted to ask if that is your main goal as developer of PISA, having this action of change. And when you see the results and interpret the results of PISA, how do teachers understand it, right? How this is linked? Because I see from the research perspective, and probably this is a conversation with university more than with this audience, but I see a gap between research and what happens in the classroom. We know the framework from PISA is, 20, 25, 30 years old, and change is hard. And PISA is a way of inviting this change, right? Do you see any other ways to close this gap, maybe from the teacher's perspective or from the university perspective? Maybe it's not the best question to end because it's a big question. But how do we close this gap? How do we make this gap? How do we bridge this?
I think it's perhaps the most central question in education. I think how can we close the gap between what our societies need and what's happening in the classrooms? And I do believe the honest answer is the only way to seriously close this, to have people at the front line seeing how the world is changing. If you believe, this is something the government can sort out, we just put a few experts in place, they write a new curriculum, and then we train teachers, and then 10 years later we put it in classrooms, you'll be always out of date. You will be always out of sync. And you will be always under pressures to make the system a mile wide and an inch deep. You load more and more stuff onto the school curriculum, and we teach students all sorts of stuff. So I don't think that gets you there. I think the only way, but it's a hard way, is to get teachers in the schools themselves look more outward, build better connections, see how the world is changing. And that brings me back to, your initial part of the question of PISA. Why is PISA as it is? It's not, that we have any idea of how education should be, and then, we try to build a test around it. PISA is simply reflecting the way in which knowledge and skills are used in the modern world. We are always asked, I've often asked, your field is mathematics. Why don't you test, we teach trigonometry at age, 15. Why don't you test a lot of trigonometry? Why do you put, probabilistic thinking or so into this test? And the answer is simply that, trigonometry has very little of a role in our societies today. Actually, this was one of, I conclude with this. When we started to design the mathematics test in PISA, we looked at the curricula of countries. This was our starting point. And we saw, trigonometry had this big part in the teaching of 15-year-olds. So we went first to ask the mathematicians, is trigonometry the foundation of mathematics or one of the key kind of paradigms? And the mathematician said, no, it's just one specific application. It could have lots of them. Then we went out to ask the engineers and said, you need a lot of people who know that. And they said, not really, it's all done by computers today. Why do we teach trigonometry? Because 300-400 years ago, that's what people used to measure the size of the fields and the structure of the houses. And we kept it in the curricula because if you take something out, you'll always have someone who protests.
Absolutely.
Someone will always tell you teaching Latin is the most important way to teach logical thinking, and you keep it and you keep trigonometry. And we never get rid of anything. And but with PISA, we take a fresh look. We basically ask ourselves, in today's world, if you can't think in terms of probabilities, you're never going to understand the phenomena around it. So we built this test around this. It's not an idea that we have. It's simply a clear, scientific monitoring of the evolution of the demand of skills. And then we built this test around, and that creates a kind of dissonance with the curricula. I recognize this now. But we believe that dissonance is quite healthy.
It's an agent of change.
It's in, you can see how what you teach is, and that was the big differentiator. Before, the PISA, I worked on the TIMSS, which actually went the other way. They said basically we look at the common denominator of national curricula. We teach we test what everybody is taught. you don't have that problem. But then you lose out to look at the margins. The most important thing in life happen not at the periphery of your vision, but they happen at the margin, and you need to make that visible. So, yeah, but I think the more awareness we can build for people, that's why I believe, teachers of tomorrow are not just good instructors. They need to be good designers of learning environments. They need to understand how the world around is changing. They need to be able to connect what they do in class with the real world. And it's going to be a lot more demanding work for teachers, but I also believe that the future of teaching is going to be a lot more interesting.
So thank you very much, Andreas. It's been very inspirational, all your words during all the morning. So I think we need to take that words and settle down our thoughts about them, because there's a lot that you are offering this morning. If you have access to the report, there has a lot of things. My main take is that, okay, we are doing not so good. Western countries are not doing very well in general. Asian economies, Asian countries are doing better, and they are working hard on that and improving. But we are not doing so bad in social emotions either. Okay, so that's a new intake that we didn't know. Our next session here in Cercle Economia is going to be June the 13th, when we are giving these awards that we give every year to schools in Catalonia. We have had a very successful call, so we have had many candidates, and we have chosen 5 very good schools. And that day we will say, out of them, which one is the best out of the vocational studies and the primary and secondary studies. And one thing that we have been visiting those schools that struck me quite a lot this time is that some of them were creating special rooms with a little bit of this type of IKEA sofas and so on, to have more interaction between students and tutors by groups, small groups, and to have this link, this interconnection that was for the school board was, okay, this is really important for us because this is the way that we can improve all the environmental situation in the school and to improve all this learning process and this interaction. So I don't know whether this is going to be fruitful in the future, but at least there are experiences here that show us that we are going that way. So thank you very much again to Andreas, to Albert, Verónica, to Innovamat, and Cercle Economia, and all of you for coming to that call, because at Cercle Economia we want to be engaged with the education community and try to offer reflections that help us out to improve the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, recognizing great schools is a fantastic way to actually raise the status of the profession.
That's great.
I really think that's very important. We do too little to find and recognize and scale the good experience that you already see.
That drove our decision to have those awards from 2008, so it's quite a long time. We're happy with that program. We'll keep on that. Thank you.
Good.